people really admire the most about your career, Hodge, is that you very much stood for something as an athlete. Like many athletes come in and their intention is just to win. Okay, they just come in. Okay, if I just win the match, that's all I'm looking for. But you did something much more significant than that. You didn't fight, as you say, for medals. You fought for an ideal, and that ideal was positional control leading to submission. You won almost every match, including your most significant matches, by submission. And this was at a time when relatively few jiu-jitsu matches were won by submission. The overwhelming majority were won by advantage or some kind of match tactics. You pretty much ignored match tactics in the sport of jiu-jitsu, and your tactic was, if I get a hold of this guy, I'm going to hold him down, control him, and finish him. And you did that, as I said, to 3 different generations of jiu-jitsu players. I think what people find most remarkable about your career is that you weren't just the guy who was happy to win. You represented an ideal of the sport. Jiu-jitsu is the science and the art of control leading to submission. So many athletes over the last 25 years have branched away from that and looked to win by advantage or through the application of some kind of tactics in the match. Of course, tactics are important, but no one got closer to that jiu-jitsu ideal, and no one fought harder for it. On the few occasions that you lost in jiu-jitsu, there weren't many, but on the few that did happen, it was largely because the other guy engaged in tactics while you were trying to finish the other guy. And I think what was most memorable about your performance in the sport was that you had an ideal and you fought towards it, and in the overwhelming majority of cases, you achieved that ideal. It wasn't just that you were coming out to beat the other guy; you were coming out to finish the other guy. And the whole soul of our sport, the whole manner in which what attracts people to jiu-jitsu is this idea of the idea of control to submission, and you manifested that better than anyone else in your generation too. And I think that's what people look up to you so much for, and what makes you stand out. It's not just the fact that you won, but the manner in which you won, which makes you stand out completely from the crowd, and made you incontestably the best of your generation.
Yeah, thank you, John. I mean, it's how you see things and what you're trying to achieve. You know, like you said, is that I never really fought for medals. You know, I fought for the sake of being the best, and the only way to be the best is to win against your opponent, but not just win, because winning by advantage, it doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove that you're the best. It just proves that you won that specifically match. You know, the only way to be the best is to submit in your opponent, because then there's no doubt who's the best. You know, if I can win by takedown, the takedown made me win. You know, if we fight 10 times, every time will be different. You know, it's if you can only win by advantage or 2 points, it means that you're still almost in the same level as the person you're fighting. But if you're able to submit the other person, then it puts you in another level. And I think that's what I always try to achieve, you know, to really be better than my opponents. And the only real way to prove that is through submission. Even you can, you know, win by 2 or 5 points, but you still put you in a similar level on your opponent. It puts you slightly ahead because you won, you know, you're able to do more than him. But it's still very close. And especially looking back at some of the matches I have, and, you know, like bad referees' decisions, you know, for me, it was always clear that I need to submit everyone to really has no doubt of that I'm better, you know, and that's why I always train to be the best, to beat everyone.
Yeah, I have to say, Hodge, you had a huge influence on me from that period, 2003, all the way through to the time when you began MMA, and really emphasizing this idea of the only kind of outcome that really counts is submission. And you see that in my coaching philosophy. I inherited that from you, with the extraordinary submission rates of the squad. Even now, my athletes are never happy with just winning. It's only winning by submission satisfies them. And you were a huge part of that. Your influence on me was very strong there. And you see the truth of your words in sports like mixed martial arts. Like, how many times have you seen a situation where a guy gets taken down and then 3 seconds later he's back up on his feet? Like in a fight, just getting a takedown doesn't really mean that much. A guy can always just get back up to his feet. How many times have you seen a guy get to a position and the guy on bottom just scrambles out and gets away? Just scoring points, as you say, Roger, doesn't really indicate dominance, but submission in almost every case. There are some exceptions. There are some flying submissions which don't indicate dominance, but in most cases, the overwhelming majority of cases, submission is a true checkmate in the sport, which indicates dominance and a unconditional surrender, an unambiguous victory. Whereas winning by takedown, winning by advantage, these are very ambiguous victories. And in other sports like mixed martial arts, you can see that they don't really contribute at all to, let me rephrase that, they don't indicate any kind of dominance whatsoever. Like, you can have an athlete who gets taken down 6 times in a mixed martial arts fight, stands back up to his feet, and then knocks the other guy out. Right? So how valuable were the takedowns? But control leading to submission, that indicates true dominance. And you were the greatest ideal of that in your generation. That had a huge impact on me and the way in which I coach my squad. And you see, they strongly emphasize the idea of control leading to submission.
Yeah. No, I can see that with your team, And I mean, fighting, you wanna win a fight, you have to dominate your opponent. That's the only way to, to win. I mean, not the only way to win, but you wanna dominate someone. You need to pin him down. Then when he cannot move, choke him out.
I heard you were pretty good at that.
I try.
What?
Sorry. Você tem câmera aqui, só pra te avisar.
Vou mostrar.
Tá bom, vai lá e depois eu vou. Sorry, guys. Just in case. So John, I told people that they could ask you a few questions to put on the chat. So let me just run through some of the questions here, see if there's any interesting ones. So guys, when you send a question, please, interesting questions. Otherwise they'll be ignored. Someone saying Gary's 10 DVD is amazing.
That actually raises an interesting point, Roger. One of the things I strongly emphasize in my coaching program is I never just teach my athletes to perform. I teach them to teach. Okay, if you look at all of my students, every single one of my senior students is not only an outstanding athlete, they're an outstanding teacher. Again, this is something you were a big influence on me. For those of you who don't know, Roger is not only the greatest jiu-jitsu player of his generation, he's also one of the greatest teachers of his generation. I don't know if you've ever been to a Roger Gracie seminar or been to a school or seen his online course program. Roger is one of the greatest teachers I've ever seen. He has a very subtle, understated teaching style, but one of the absolute best I've seen in my entire career. That was another sense in which Roger influenced me. Whenever I go to teach my students, I teach them to teach, because nothing improves your understanding of the sport of jiu-jitsu better than teaching it to other people. That was one of my lessons as a young purple belt when Henzo came to me all those years ago and said, "John, you got to start teaching classes." I was a part-time amateur in the sport. I wasn't even taking the sport that seriously. Suddenly I had to teach, and that changed my whole outlook. It took me to where I am. So the question was, Gary's, I got his DVD, he's a great teacher. That applies to all of my students. And I've always noticed that the people who are the most technically adept in the sport are those who teach the most. Roger was a great teacher. My students are great teachers. And so I strongly emphasize the idea of when I coach my students, I coach them to teach other people, knowing that this will make them better in the long run. Long-term development is often fostered by good teaching skills. You know, Hodger, it's a weird thing about our sport that the best athletes are also expected to be coaches. Like if you look at other sports, no one does that. Like if you look at the best soccer players like Ronaldo, no one expects Ronaldo to open up a soccer school and start teaching students. You know, Mike Tyson, the best boxer of the 1980s, you don't see Mike Tyson open up a boxing school and have to teach and then go out on the weekends and fight. It's a strange thing about jiu-jitsu that the best athletes are expected to also teach as well. Part of that is practical because there's not too much money in jiu-jitsu. And so the athletes have to teach in order to make money. But I've always believed that fact that the best athletes in the sport also have to have a dual role of teacher as well as athlete enhances their technical progress. And much of what I see observing as a coach is that the most technical and technically fluent athletes in the sport are invariably the best teachers. Hodger's a good example. My own students are good examples.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Teaching, it does give you a much better understanding of the techniques because it makes you think. You know, I can do for myself a lot of the things that I used to do for years and years. I mean, some of the things I did, but, you know, a lot of the things I was doing naturally without actually realizing step by step what I was doing. So it does in a reflective way, but, you know, almost your subconscious does that move without actually you realizing what you're doing step by step. And once you're forced to teach, then you start understanding exact step by step, and teaching improves the technique. You know, every time I've been teaching the same move. Every time I teach, there's something different. You know, it's always a adjustment. So it's always something that to improve, and you see that only when you're teaching, when, you know, because it makes you think of what you're doing. And,
yes.
It's very, very important on your technical level to teach because you will start understanding the technique more, the art, instead of, you know, just being like tough.
Hello everyone. So I just finished a series of moves from the mount position. You know, I'm very new to have a very strong mount, and I guarantee you, if you follow the steps, you will improve your mount. But the one thing I keep saying over and over again in the videos that is very important for you to pay attention. Before you go for any submission, you have to establish a good control first. That goes for any situation in jiu-jitsu.